Before we talk about the wall, we must first talk about the city. Berlin is the capital of Germany. It's a place with a very long and important history. After the Second World War ended in 1945, Germany was a defeated country. The winners of the war, the United States, Great Britain, France, and the Soviet Union, decided to split Germany into 4 parts. Each country would look after one part. They did the same thing with Berlin. Even though the city was deep inside the Soviet part of Germany, it too was divided into 4 sectors. This was meant to be a temporary solution, a way to manage the country after years of terrible conflict. This arrangement created a very strange situation. The western parts of Berlin, controlled by the Americans, British and French, were like a small island of Western life. They were surrounded by the Soviet-controlled eastern part of Germany. You could travel from one part of the city to another quite easily at first. People had jobs and family on different sides. But the countries that controlled Germany had very different ideas. The Western Allies wanted to build a democratic and capitalist Germany. The Soviet Union wanted to create a communist state. These different ideas would soon cause a massive problem right in the heart of Berlin. The relationship between the Soviet Union and the Western Allies grew cold. This period became known as the Cold War. It wasn't a war with soldiers and guns, but a war of ideas and tension. Berlin became the front line of this new conflict. In the western part of the city, life was becoming more prosperous. There were shops full of goods and people had more freedom. In the eastern part, under Soviet control, life was much harder. The economy was struggling and there were many strict rules. People in the east saw the freedom and wealth in the west, and many decided they wanted that life for themselves. This created a major headache for the leaders of East Germany and the Soviet Union. Every month, thousands of people were leaving the east and moving to the west through Berlin. They were often the most skilled and educated people, like doctors, teachers, and engineers. This brain drain was crippling the East German economy and making the communist system look bad. The leaders knew they had to do something to stop people from leaving. The open border within Berlin was an escape hatch, and they were determined to close it for good. The stage was set for a dramatic and brutal solution. The order to build the wall came from the East German leader, Walter Ulbricht. He had the full support of the Soviet leader, Nikita Khrushchev. They decided to act suddenly and secretly. In the early hours of Sunday, August 13th, 1961, the work began. While the people of Berlin were asleep, soldiers and construction workers rolled out miles of barbed wire. They tore up streets that connected the eastern and western parts of the city. They erected fences and posts, cutting right through neighborhoods, parks, and even cemeteries. The border was sealed in just one night. When Berliners woke up that morning, they were shocked. Their city was split in 2. Friends, families, and lovers were suddenly separated. People who had gone to visit relatives in another part of the city for the weekend found themselves trapped. They could no longer go home. The barbed wire was a temporary measure. Soon it was replaced by something much more permanent and frightening. A wall made of concrete blocks and slabs began to rise. This structure would become known to the world as the Berlin Wall. In the West, it was often called the Wall of Shame. The wall wasn't just a simple fence. Over the years, it became a complex system of death. It was made up of 2 parallel walls with a wide area in between. This area was called the Death Strip. It was filled with sand and gravel to show footprints. It had tripwire alarms, vicious dogs, and bright floodlights. Most terrifying of all were the watchtowers manned by East German guards. They were given orders to shoot anyone who tried to cross. The wall was not built to keep people out, it was built to lock people in. It was a prison wall that surrounded an entire society. The construction of the wall was a powerful symbol of the Cold War. It showed the world how far the communist government would go to control its people. It was a physical representation of the Iron Curtain that Winston Churchill had spoken about years earlier. The wall cut through the very heart of a great European city, turning it into a place of division and fear. For the next 28 years, this concrete monster would dominate the lives of everyone in Berlin. It stood as a constant, grim reminder of a world divided by opposing ideologies. Life on either side of the Berlin Wall could not have been more different. In West Berlin, people lived in a free and open society. It was a vibrant and bustling city, supported by the Western allies. The shops were filled with consumer goods from all over the world. People could listen to rock and roll music, read any newspaper they liked, and travel freely to West Germany and beyond. West Berlin felt like a showcase of capitalism and democracy. It was an island of liberty, a bright, colourful place that stood in stark contrast to the grey world on the other side of the concrete barrier. In East Berlin, life was controlled by the state. The communist government dictated what people could say, read and do. The secret police, known as the Stasi, watched everyone. Neighbours spied on neighbours. There was very little freedom of speech. The economy was planned by the government, which often led to shortages of basic goods. People had to wait in long queues for things like fruit or coffee. Cars were a luxury, and people could wait for years to get one. While everyone had a job and a home, life was monotonous and lacked the colour and choice available just a few hundred metres away in the west. The wall tore families apart in the most cruel way. A brother living in the east could no longer visit his sister in the west. Grandparents couldn't see their grandchildren grow up. For many, the only way to communicate was by waving over the wall at a distance until the authorities made that impossible too. It was a daily source of heartbreak. Imagine standing on a platform, looking across a guarded strip of land and seeing the home where your loved ones live, knowing you cannot reach them. This was the reality for thousands of Berliners for nearly 3 decades. Despite the danger, people were desperate to escape the oppression of the East. Their attempts were often incredibly creative and brave. Some dug tunnels under the wall. One family even built a hot air balloon out of small pieces of cloth and flew to freedom. Others tried to swim across the city's canals or drive cars at high speed through the checkpoints, but these attempts were extremely risky. The East German guards were ordered to stop escapees by any means necessary. Many people were caught and sent to prison. Over 140 people were killed trying to cross the Berlin Wall, their dreams of freedom ending in the deadly death strip. By the late 1980s, the communist world was starting to change. In the Soviet Union, a new leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, introduced policies of glasnost, or openness, and perestroika, which means restructuring. He signaled that the Soviet Union would no longer use force to keep communist governments in power in Eastern Europe. This gave people in countries like Poland, Hungary and Czechoslovakia the courage to demand change. Protests for democracy began to grow across the region. The foundations of the old system were beginning to crumble and the cracks were starting to show. These changes had a huge effect on East Germany. All through the summer and autumn of 1989, East Germans began protesting. They gathered in cities like Leipzig, chanting, "Wir sind das Volk," which means we are the people. They demanded free elections and the right to travel. At the same time, thousands of East Germans found a new way to escape. Neighboring communist countries like Hungary and Czechoslovakia had opened their borders with the West. East Germans could now travel to these countries and then cross to freedom. The Berlin Wall was becoming pointless. The final blow came almost by accident. On the evening of November 9, 1989, an East German government official named Günter Schabowski held a press conference. He was supposed to announce new, relaxed travel rules that would come into effect later, but he was confused and read the note incorrectly. When a journalist asked when the new rules would apply, Schabowski hesitated and then said, "As far as I know, effective immediately without delay." The news spread like wildfire. Within minutes it was on West German television being broadcast into homes across East Berlin. Thousands of East Berliners heard the news and couldn't believe it. They rushed to the checkpoints along the wall. The border guards were confused and had no orders. Faced with massive, joyful crowds, they had no choice but to open the gates. People surged through, weeping and cheering. West Berliners came to greet them with flowers and champagne. People climbed on top of the wall, dancing and singing. They took out hammers and chisels and began to chip away at the hated structure. That incredible, historic night, the Berlin Wall fell. The fall of the wall was the beginning of the end for a divided Germany and the Cold War. It led to the reunification of Germany 1 year later and symbolized the victory of freedom over tyranny for the entire world.